episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 30 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Engaging Experts. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Mr. Michael Maxwell to the show. Now, Mr. Maxwell is the managing partner at Maxwell & Partners, LLC, a development and consulting firm specializing in complex real estate litigation matters. He is an experienced expert witness and former professor at Nova Southeastern University. Mr. Maxwell, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Noah. It's a real pleasure.
Absolutely. Let's jump into it. With what looks like over 30 years of experience, maybe more in real estate, how did you first become involved and interested in general and expert witnessing work?
Well, that's a really good question. I was trained as an architect and city planner. And so you never really think about doing that, in those particular roles. You're there to solve problems.
Sure.
But in short, it sort of found me. I was, working in regulatory work and doing assistance on some complex projects as a consultant to landowners. And the attorneys that I was working with on this particular endeavor said, "Hey, I think you'd be a good expert for a case that we're doing." And so I said, "Well, really?" And they said, "Well, you've demonstrated that in your work. Let's see what you'd be like in court." That began it back in the 80s. Yeah.
Were you familiar with expert witnessing at all at that point? Was that something that was even on your radar, or was it kind of out of the blue?
No, I hadn't even been in traffic court. I knew all about, the legal process and regulations and how the court system worked and everything, as, my role in government and in planning. But in terms of being an expert, no, I didn't even think of myself as such.
Were you able to find somebody to do any mentoring or show you the ropes? Was it just the attorney?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I wish someone had mentored me, but no one showed me the ropes. I was just sort of thrown in, and it was like, you're either going to drown or you're going to swim, take your pick. And so, that's how really the expert found me. And it was on the job training. And after all these years, I'm still learning things and still seeking to improve myself on every case.
For some of our newer expert witnesses, what were some of the things that you wish you had known when you first were kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool?
Well, I wish I had known about asking for a mentor and people to, advise me. I think I would have been a little more confident in my role in some of these early cases. And I probably wouldn't have spent the same amount of time that I did. On the job learning, can take quite a bit of time, and you've really got to distinguish that from what you're going to bill your client for actual work versus what it is that you're learning. And so I did that. I like to be very ethical in all of my dealings with people. And so that on the job training really got to me. I also learned more by reading all the subject areas. I got into, how things would work with others in some of the cases that I was involved in. And, I was still do consult with clients on a variety of real estate issues, complex, simple, on a large diversity of, in the realm of real estate. And much of my work just really focuses on solving complex problems related to construction, land use, failed projects, and then working with owners and attorneys on strategies, not only for court cases, but for development.
Is there a significant difference in the different types of cases that you choose to undertake?
I think every case is unique. And so when we talk about a different type of case, I think every case is a different type of case, because the players are different. It's like, yeah, you may be playing soccer, but at the same time, it's a different field and a different team. And so each case tends to be very unique. And, I try my best to not only adapt to that, but I look forward to it as well, because it's stimulating. You get to meet new people and you get to meet new challenges.
Absolutely. Let's back up to when you get that call and somebody hits you with, "Hey, I've got this case. I think that you're the right person." How do you determine whether or not you actually are the right person for a case? How do you know that your expertise is going to be a great fit for an engagement?
Wow. Well, first of all, I really look at what's going on and what's being asked of me. My expertise includes construction issues, due diligence, finance, entitlements, contracts, different types of, ownership structures, and as well as, land use, zoning, historic preservation. Those tend to be my overall wheelhouse. And so if I get something that's sort of out of that, and I've been asked to do certain things out of that, I tend not to try to take those cases. I really look at how am I going to work on this case? Working with counsel is really important. But most of all, to understand if the case is a good fit for me, I've got to listen. I need to read what it is that the pleadings say, and I need to understand what is it that the team wants me to achieve for them. Okay. And is that something that I think I can do based on what I have read and heard? That's essential. And that's really the basis of communications with all of the attorneys that I work with. So in terms of fit, I just recently, the roundtable group has sent me several projects of which I referred to other people because I didn't feel my expertise wholly fit that. And I knew others that I could refer to them that would be really on spot for their needs.
Speaking of, you bring up roundtable group. Do you find expert witness referral services to be particularly useful?
Yes, I do. Roundtable group, since I've been involved with it, has asked me, to contemplate a number of cases, several of which I've taken, and I really enjoy it. First of all, working with them is easy. And when I say easy, it follows a standard format, it moves quickly and, decisions are taken and, billing and taking care of retainer issues and contract issues, you know, they take care of it for me. And that's something that I really feel good about, in working with them. And with other companies, I can't do that to the same extent that I can with Roundtable Group. And I'm involved with several others and I try to have cases ongoing all the time if I can. And so, some it's like, okay, you got to bill backwards, but Roundtable Group, I'm able to achieve, a retainer with that because hey, we've all been in this business and not gotten paid. So, I always like to get paid for what I do if I can.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad that Roundtable Group has been working out for you. You had mentioned teams, and that's an interesting topic. How often does your work exist on a trial team? Are you working with other expert witnesses, paralegals, consultants? What does a typical trial team that you're on consist of, and how is your interaction among the various pieces?
Well, in terms of teams, every project is different, as I mentioned. I'll give you an example. I'm working with several attorneys presently on a dispute between a purchaser and a buyer. And it's an after the fact dispute long after the property has closed. And the team I'm really working with is the two attorneys, because you have to remember that virtually everything is discoverable.
Right.
So, we have to be very careful, in how we structure our communications, because if I send notes off to a group of assistants, that's going to, and ask them to do something that's going to be discoverable. Whereas the telephone call that I have with them, that it just says, well, that's what's discoverable. And did you have any notes? Well, no, I just remembered it all. So, there's a lot of give and take with that. The other thing that I really enjoy doing, and I figured this out at the beginning of the project when I take it on, and that is, what do you want me to do?
Mm-hmm.
You want me to just to write a report to be an expert? You want me to evaluate this information? The depositions and the the evidence, and then present a neutral report, or do you really want me to be part of your strategy? And the team I'm working with right now, the two attorneys are excellent. And we have periodic calls where it's, okay, I really think you should look at this. And that's me telling them so that they can use my expert's ability to help their case the best possible. So I referred them to a number of things. We've looked at bringing in some other experts for small issues that are going to really support that, as well as, they're not real estate people, they're lawyers. And so
Right.
they're arguing a case. And so I'm trying to help them understand the realm of real estate and how that works. And so it's a real two-way effort. And that's the way I really enjoy doing it. I've worked on other cases where they just said, okay, you're going to be deposed. Here's the information. You're going to be deposed on a certain day. And then right before trial, they said, well, don't say this or don't say that. And that's it. So that's not my how I enjoy working with the most, and that's not how I think I can add value, to my cases. Working on part of the strategy with them, going over the information to make sure A, it's correct, and B, that where we're getting that from, that person's got some credibility. And, what is this written evidence? What does the documentary evidence say? And how does that relate to what it is that we're doing? And then trying to put it all together. As we put it all together, I work with them, say, hey, here's where I'm going with this. This is what I've got. And, we bounce that back and forth. And so it's time on the phone and sometimes a little bit of email too.
Absolutely. Do you advocate for a more proactive approach if you're in the other type of situation where the attorneys aren't offering a lot and they just kind of say, just like you said before a deposition, don't say this, don't say that, and go? Do you think that expert witnesses need to say, hey, these are the things that I need to be able to perform my best? Or do you think it's best for experts to kind of just perform under the situations that they find themselves in?
Well, I usually begin the conversation with the attorneys and say, and tell them that, exactly what you said. Look, here's how I can best help you. It's up to you in order to tell me, how you want me to interact with you. And I'm more than willing to do that. But, to have my services really be value add to you and give you the impact that you want, I think you're better off, working with me so that we can go back and forth on a supportive basis. Otherwise, I don't think it's good value. It's just
Absolutely.
like, okay, I'll just show up in court, and we'll hope for the best.
Can you tell me about some of the different venues that you've worked in and maybe some of the differences between them?
Oh, wow. Let me tell you something. I've worked over many venues. I've been in federal court. I've represented municipalities and government entities and into state court in several states. I've worked in civil and criminal courts, bankruptcy court supervised settlements and mediation and arbitration. I've even been appointed to run failed businesses by bankruptcy courts.
Hmm.
So, one of my most interesting things in that was, I spent 5 years unwinding one business with assets in El Salvador and across Florida. And let me tell you, El Salvador is not an easy place or a safe place to necessarily do business. And at that time, they were still recovering from the Civil War.
Hmm.
And I was charged with recovering property and completing construction necessary to finalize a recovery and sale. I've also worked on fraud cases that occurred in Brazil and, extended into federal and civil courts in Florida. I'm currently involved in a case in South Carolina, and I've done work in and out of Jamaica. So my venues are pretty broad in that regard. And I'll tell you something, it can be nice and it can be very trying too. Zoom is a real help in terms of minimizing one's travel.
Speaking of travel, when you do have to get on an airplane somewhere, how do you manage those expenses? Does that get billed directly to the client, or do you make that part of your retainer? Do you get reimbursed? How do you handle travel expenses?
Well, I try wherever possible to receive a reasonable retainer and then work against it. I don't let the retainer, constrain me in any way. If I will always tell, who I'm working with that I'm going to have travel expenses. When we come to our agreement, I have a set of fees that I charge, which are, gradated by, am I going to be talking to you? Am I going to be writing a report? Am I going to be being deposed? Am I going to be on the stand? So I have a whole range of fees that we do that I think is fair. And, they're generally accepted. I charge a flat fee per day to travel. In other words, so if I'm traveling, it's a set amount of money,
Hmm.
that you're going to pay me, and then my expenses on top of that.
Sure.
I don't travel first class, unless it is that you want me to. But at the same time, I don't charge for my time other than that flat fee. If we're then going to be engaged, the next day usually, in our trial or deposition or whatever, yeah, that's when the hours start accumulating again. But a flat fee for a day plus reimbursable expenses is the easiest way to do it.
When you're traveling to all of these venues all over the world and all over the country, how important is it that you have some understanding of the differences vis-a-vis the laws and regulations and just the common things? I had one guest tell me that they almost started calling judges Your Honor in England, where they don't use Your Honor. Do you do you have to make sure that you're ready for those sorts of eventualities? And if so, how do you go about educating yourself?
Oh, wow. Well, I speak Spanish and, I went to school in Mexico and lived on the frontier in El Paso for a number of years. And so I understand Spanish culture, fairly well. And of course, then you understand, and then as you get into it, you understand that Salvadorian culture is different from Nicaraguan culture, is different from Guatemalan, is different from different parts of Mexico,
Right.
just like it is in the United States. And so I really listen first and try to understand, ask a lot of questions. And, when I went to Brazil, I had to have a translator, with me, but, I could do most of the work in Spanish when I was uh, when in Salvador and Jamaica, you just go, hey, man, so, so you really adopt what's there. They have English common law down there. So it's much simpler, except when you're dealing with land, you've got to look at different land systems like roods and chains and different surveying techniques, and then move back and forth between meters and imperial.
Absolutely. As a former professor, does that inform the way that you interact with juries and your demeanor because you're, used to explaining things to people?
I was accused of being a professor for years before I was a professor. So you're right, it does. I try to state what the problem is or what the question is, and then very methodically move through, well, this is this, and this is how I got to that. And so I try to do that very much in my writing and in support, in my reports, as well as being on the stand. I think it makes it easier for the judge. A lot of the cases, are without a jury, they're bench trials. And so, when you go through business things like that, it needs to be very clear. It also needs to have a set of standards that you apply to it, just like you would in academia.
Mhm.
This comes from this source, and this is a reliable source accepted by, the American Institute of Testing Services or whatever it is that you're doing. And so that you have the veracity, as well as the gravitas, from your experience and background to show in court that your opinion is not only valid, what you're saying is accepted and considered to be either normal or standard in terms of, the business itself of real estate, which is vast and diverse.
Speaking of vast and diverse, how do you stay? You told me earlier about your wheelhouse and then named about 2,000 different things that are in your wheelhouse. How do you stay on top of such a broad, diverse, and dynamic niche?
Well, I read a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing, and I have a good cadre of people that I'm with, and both in work and sociability. I continue to be very involved in my community, and so I'm active in on a monthly basis in zoning and other matters. I have I started my career really in 1975, and so I've been around for a long time. And there's an accumulation of knowledge, but it's also maintaining that knowledge, keeping up with, and making sure that I'm on top of. And then when I get a case, I also do more research. So I want to make sure that A, what I know is current. B, I want to know that it's still valid. And C, I want to know that, if there's any industry standards that have changed or modified over time. That's very important to me. Reading, listening, and asking good questions really helps focus, what it is that I've got to bring to the table.
Is additional research that you need to do as part of an engagement a billable expense?
I generally don't do that. I don't bill it. What I do, Noah, is to work closely with the attorneys and say, here's what I want to do. and get them to say, yeah, that sounds good. Or, maybe you want to think about it this way or that way. Working with attorneys is really important because, you know, I want to have a collegial relationship with these guys. And it's like talking to you on the phone. I mean, here on Zoom, you
Sure.
know, I want to make sure that it's pleasant, enjoyable, and that it's productive for both of us. I don't get into arguments. I'll listen. If I disagree with something, I'll think about it before I bring it back up. And, I'm there to serve them and their needs on the case, and I'm not there to solve the case. I'm there unless I'm working it out of bankruptcy. I'm there to be, I'm there to be supportive of their arguments.
What do you enjoy about being a not only a real estate expert, but an expert witness in general? What is edifying?
Oh, so many things. I love the challenge of it. I love learning new things, of meeting the different people, of coming to understand maybe how a transaction, transpired and then fell apart,
Mm-hmm.
or how someone came to understand something different than what it was that they thought they had done. Um, just the diversity of things. I would say about 60% of my work is for defendants and rather than plaintiffs. And I've done cases where it was really bordering on elder abuse. I mean,
Mm.
I was in a case where there was a vulture fund that came in and bought a property from a very elderly man. And you just in dealing with him, you could understand, he was having some cognitive difficulties, and but yet he was very successful and very intelligent. But he couldn't deliver on part of the sale, and so he canceled that sale, and then they came back 2 years later and tried to enforce it,
Mm.
and it was wrong, and they tried to use all kinds of legal things, and they even brought a, a an appraiser in on that particular transaction. I've never seen appraisal, that this guy made, and it's like, what? You're going to tell me that the value of this property is this appraisal that was done 15 years ago in three counties away, and it's not even related. So, I enjoy that, all of those challenges and trying to figure out interesting things. I also really enjoy helping people. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's always been, the thing that I've done. I don't take cases where, I think that I'm going to be drawn into any kind of moral question. I've got to live with myself. And
Right.
so I've turned down cases where it's, oh, well, can you do X, Y, and Z? And I didn't really believe that, and I thought it was best for someone else to take that on. So, like I said, I got to get up every morning. And for all those mornings, I'm going to get up.
Absolutely. You had mentioned that you have a roughly 60-40 split between defense and plaintiff side cases. Is there a significant difference to an expert witness in working for defense versus plaintiff?
Yeah, there is. In the defense, you really got to go figure out what is it that the plaintiff is not only looking at, but what is it that they're alleging that you did or didn't do? Okay. And then piece that together with the documentary evidence and then the depositions of all the people involved. And so you're really working backwards from it. On the plaintiff side, you're really moving forward with it. You've got the complaint and you're moving, a whole set of facts that up front, you know, in order to do that. And then you go back and try to support them. So one is a forward movement, and then the other one's, backward movement. In other words, I've got to reconstruct this thing and to make and then to see where it broke. So it's reverse engineering, I guess, is what it's called.
Absolutely. One thing that I'm starting to dig into a little bit are pre-trial or pre-deposition routines. Do you have
Mhm.
anything that you like to do to get yourself ready for the day? Could be hours and hours of a deposition. It could be a difficult cross-examination. Are you sure to like make sure you eat something or make sure you don't eat something? Or what is your pre-trial or pre-deposition routine?
Well, usually on a pretrial, pre-deposition, I'm going to meditate
Hmm.
and I'm going to bring myself to a nice calm level. I'm going to minimize the coffee that I drink, and I'm going to drink a lot of lemon water. I'm going to have water with me, and because I dry out, and from being asked questions and providing answers over time. But I also try to maintain a calm composure and go, look, this is business, this is court, and it's all about facts. It's not about emotion. It's about what it is that we have to solve today, and how can I best do that? You know, I grew up in the military, and so I tend to be very respectful of people and their opinions. Uh, I I have a pretty quick mind, I think, and I've been told. But at the same time, I've got to work on holding myself back sometimes because they'll get to the question and they'll ask the question, and then sometimes there's a little corollary that goes along with it. So I always try to make sure that I give a good pause in all of those things before answering that question, and then look at them directly to make sure that that the attorney's face says, "Well, I'm done. It's time for you to answer." So we can do that. And I will usually bring notes in a binder and things like that. And of course, for the most part, those have already been discovered and everything, but they're aids for me to go and look at, while we're talking so that I don't make mistakes. And we all make mistakes, in our
Sure.
testing. So, it's about trying to align everything as best as possible.
When you are in front of a jury or even in your expert witness reports, do you ever use demonstratives such as charts, graphs, models, anything like that?
Oh, you bet. I mean, I did a case where this case devolved from a zoning issue where a county government had promised to change the zoning on a particular piece of property that was being taken, okay, for a major habitat restoration and preservation. And the wonderful thing about it was the county kept refusing, thinking, oh, well, we'll just let this go through and we won't do that. And so we'll save all this money. Well, no, I mean, I sat down, afterwards, okay, the case, I mean, the sale closed. I mean, it had to, okay. But the property owner was just really angry because they were promised one thing and didn't get it, okay. Also that this entity could save money. Well, I put together a number of graphics and showed how, what had happened to it in addition to spreadsheets and what their entitlements were like. And as it went through court, they ended up with $40 million settlement, in their favor over and above what they had already gotten paid for the property.
Wow.
So, but it took a few years, to wind that through. But the judge cited that. And then did another case on signage, and land use regulation. And about half of it was graphical to show the court, what the standards really were. Because when you look at the zoning code, until recently, these zoning codes weren't graphic, okay? And they just listed things. Oh, your sign can't be XYZ or it can't do this. And so I did a whole set of graphics and got some graphic people to work with me. And we put that together. And the judge cited that as, hey, I understand what it is that you were doing. And by the way, your client wins. So that was good. I think it's really, really important, to do that. Because if people can't see something that way, what they do see is what they see, not necessarily what it is. And so in my cases, I want to try to show everybody the same thing. So if I'm going to show them a picture, say, this building, okay, I've got a picture of the building. I don't want them to imagine it because some of them may make it, Cinderella's castle, and other people may make it, Uncle Tom's cabin. So I don't want to make sure that there's differing things, in people's mind. I want to make sure that they see the same thing that we're all trying to talk about.
Do you typically produce your own demonstratives or do you have an outside company build them for you?
It really depends on what it is that's needed. I'm skilled enough that I can do that in certain cases, and then I have other folks where it's they'll create something much better than I can, and so that we will do that. And they all have to be done at separate scale too, because they're all admissible. So you've got to turn it on one side so that it can get into the court record. And then when you bring it into court, you blow it up.
Sure.
And so you really want to start and do that way. In terms of spreadsheets and complex financial, matters, I mean, you're looking at sheets that will go on and on and on. So it's about how you take the essence of that and then put that up in court so that it's very impactful. This equals this, and this is why this is this, rather than having these long string of numbers or anything like that. Because it doesn't make any sense. They're not experts. They're
Right.
relying on me to tell that story.
Absolutely. Do you have any pivotal cases that you can talk about? You obviously, can't always give specifics because of various and sundry rules, but in general, are there cases that either reinforced the way that you go about expert witnessing or changed in some fundamental way the way that you go about some aspect of expert witnessing?
As I mentioned, Noah, everything is really unique, even though, being an expert is pretty much the same each time. Each one of these interactions, just like, meeting other people, yes, it's another person, but it's wholly different. And so I would say that what really changes is my ability to be more and more flexible in terms of thinking, in terms of dealing with things, and then looking at stuff, in different ways. I always tell people that, I'm an out of the box thinker, because I know what the inside of the box looks like, because I get inside of the box, understand what's in there, and then get outside of it and look and see what's on the outside, and then put the two together. So that's really what I've learned more and more over time. I mean, my first, undertakings when I was in my early 30s were, I was absolute, of course, and because I knew it all. I had a master's degree. And so we just don't think like that anymore. I tried very hard, to look at multiple angles of everything in every case. So, and for me, that's fun.
Sure. Absolutely. And it should be fun that, you should be enjoying your work. Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for either newer expert witnesses or for attorneys that work with expert witnesses?
Listen, be kind, be sympathetic, be understanding, and do your best to try to be a team player. We've got different generations that are working together today, and not everybody speaks the same language, even though it may be in English. Different venues, different cultures, everything's just a little bit different. I do my best to be open-minded, sincere, honest, and ethical. Ethics are so important in court. And if anything, that would be my recommendation to folks. Be as ethical and honest as you absolutely can. If you make a mistake, put the nails in your hand first, and admit it. If there's other issues where you don't know about something, don't say that you do. Say, I don't know that, and I can't answer that question. Litigation is a very expensive process. And, we take this on hoping for the best, and it's up to us as experts to do the best that we can for the people that have retained us. And all of those issues go to, the points of ethics, honesty, and the ability to do what you're asked to, when you're asked to, and to deliver that work on time. And then, if needed, to be flexible and make changes and modifications as the process goes on. So, in short, it's just like being a human being.
Sage advice. Excellent. Mr. Maxwell, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Noah, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Of course. And thank you to our listeners for joining me for another episode of Engaging Experts. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Engaging Experts. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com.